when you can start to see creativity as a need instead of just a want, instead of just an indulgent desire that you have, that helps to remove the shame as well. Because we feel shame when we think that we're taking time for creativity that should be going other places. Should is your clue that that task has likely been assigned by someone else's expectation. Hey, sunshine. Welcome back to another episode of the Neurodivergent Creative Podcast. And this month, the month of April, first of all, it's my birthday month, so please celebrate me at all times. And also this month, I wanted to do kind of a series on the theme of it's not your fault. So I want to talk about a lot of internalized ableism and shame and all that stuff when it comes to your hobbies and productivity and all that jazz. So to kick us off, today's episode is about guilt and shame. And this comes up for us creatively in a lot of ways. So one of my favorite things to start teasing out the guilt feelings is telling you to use your really nice art supplies. And you probably had a very visceral reaction to that. Like, no, I cannot use my very nice art supplies. Those are for special occasions. Those are for when I deserve them. Those are for when I am good enough for them. And that comes from guilt and shame. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. But first, some definition. So guilt and shame are definitely related, but they're not the same thing. Guilt is a feeling that comes up and arises when you have done something wrong, when you have hurt somebody, when you have done something that you are not supposed to do, and you feel bad about doing the wrong thing. Shame is more of a all-encompassing, I am bad. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I'm a bad person. Neither of those things are necessarily true. So we're going to start jumping in on those. Remorse is also kind of mixed up in there, but like you can feel remorse without guilt. And you can feel like sort of sympathetically sorry and like remorseful and compassionate towards someone, like say they have lost a loved one. You can feel remorseful just sort of in general because that's a really sad thing that happened. Or is remorse, now that I'm saying it, I'm like, is remorse specifically about your own actions? Is remorse like regretting your action and seeking amends? Now I'm going to have to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm going to try and keep it focused on guilt and shame. So let's go back to our example of using your nice art supplies. So for me, I got this set of acrylic paints from my mother for Christmas an obscene number of years ago. I should not still own any of these paints. They should have long ago been painted upon a canvas and gone out into the world. And yet I was like, no, but they're so valuable. They're so special. I don't deserve to use them. I would feel guilty when I used one up. And obviously, like the ones that I used up first were all of like the bright, vibrant colors. So the pinks, the greens, the yellows. And now I am left with a lot of sort of like the darker colors, browns, kind of ochre-y yellows, because I tend to be a brighter color user than the more like muted dark tones. And so now I have all these like browns and purples and stuff. You'd think I would have used up all the purple. I'm a purple bitch, but they're kind of goopy now. And sometimes when I go to use them, I get this like gross, like oil slick of like wateriness that comes out and then like really goopy paint. And I'm like, I wasted them. I was so worried about the fact that I was going to use them up, which is their purpose, that I didn't use them for so long because I thought I was prolonging their life But really, art supplies are made to be used. Paints are going to go bad. The more times you box them up and move them to your next home without using them, the greater the likelihood that you're going to break your colored pencils, or you're going to, I don't know, lose a bunch of canvases that were in storage to mold or something. And then what was the point? What was the point of having all those art supplies and loving your passion and loving your creativity if you never let yourself actually use it? And this is where the guilt and the shame come in. And the guilt is for more specific things. Like, I used up all the paint that my mom gave me, and I feel guilty about that. Okay, we can unpack that individually. That is something like I can coach on that in 4 minutes and you'll be fine. But when it's shame, when it's this underlying sensation of, I can't use my art supplies because I'm not good enough to use my art supplies, because those art supplies don't deserve me and I don't deserve those art supplies. And again, I'm taking one very specific example. Creative shame can come from many, many places. Being, I guess, shamed by teachers. I was trying to find a different word for shame, but no, just shame. Being shamed by teachers, being judged by your peers, especially when we are neurodivergent and maybe have like a hyperfixation. The kids who just sat at lunch in the cafeteria with a sketchbook, doodling, they were drawing, and they were drawing very well. And then like every time somebody would come up and be like, oh, what are you drawing? They clutch it to their chest. They're like, nobody could see this. And then when you finally do see the sketchbook, it's gorgeous. Why are we so ashamed of art? Why is it so weird to be a kid with a sketchbook? Why do we treat creativity in like the tween to teen years like it makes you weird? Furthermore, why do we fear weird things? I love weird stuff. More weird kids. That's what I say. Let's have more weird kids. But in like middle and high school, I think that's when the shame really starts to set in. So this is like, if you are not just kind of conventionally good at art, maybe you're really good at something more abstract, or maybe you're just not interested in something more conventional and you naturally flow to the more abstract. But like, I used to doodle horses and unicorns and dolphins all the time. And I mean, they were medium good at best. They were not delightful. Had I continued drawing and taking drawing classes and art classes, I could probably draw you like a realistic dolphin. I see the things people are capable of drawing, and I understand that comes with practice. And yet I feel shame when I see an example of a beautiful work of art that someone else has created because they put in the time and I didn't. It's so weird how shame comes up. So my challenge to you is to think about how shame shows up for you creatively. When you see other people's artwork, what emotion do you feel? Do you feel envy? Do you feel anger? Do you feel shame because you're not on their level? Do you feel neutral? Do you feel excited? Like, hey, if that's possible for them, then it's possible for me. What are you thinking when you see other people's art, when you see examples of people going for it and doing the thing? And how does that compare to how you felt about it in middle or high school versus your young adulthood versus now? I'm assuming everybody is a millennial. You might not be, but like, cut me a little slack there. And really identify if you are feeling guilt over maybe I don't take enough time for my art. That's a guilt thing. I didn't use my nice art supplies and then my paints went all gross. That's a guilt thing. You feel guilty for like wasting the money or wasting your mom's money if she bought you those paints. Guilt is assigned to an action or an inaction. Shame is just this kind of simmering, I am bad and nothing will make me unbad. So when you are feeling activated by your inner like monologue or inner dialogue, or whatever we want to call it. It's a monologue if it's just narrating, and it's a dialogue if you can communicate with it. So when you are having this inside conversation with yourself about other people's art, or about how much time you spend on your art, or about how good an artist you are, listen to the thoughts, notice them, get specific, give them some space to talk, because you will probably start to see and sense and notice different patterns emerging. And you might notice that some of the voices in your head are not yours. They are from other people. They are from parents or other adults who took care of you as a child, teachers, other students, anybody. It can be somebody who you saw on Instagram one day. They said something that hit you right in the self-esteem, and like, now you just feel bad. That happens. And it sucks. I think that if somebody says something and we feel like really triggered about it, it's because it reflects a fear that we have about ourselves. So for me, the example that comes to mind is my ex-husband, the abusive one. They were both kind of abusive, but one was like garden variety abusive and one was like evil villain abusive. So the one that set out to abuse me on purpose, we had an age gap that could vote. I'm not proud of this. Looking back, I'm like, why did no one around me protect me? But that's fine. I made my choices. And at one point I was out to dinner with a friend and her boyfriend, and I mentioned like getting married and having kids one day with my partner, and the boyfriend said something heinous and terrible about my partner dying before the kids were born because he was so elderly and aged. He was in his 40s at the time. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, older men have kids all the time. But it did hit me in a sore spot, like a weakness, a place that I actually worried about. Insecurity is the word that I've been vaguely searching for the past like 2 minutes. It hit me right in an insecurity about my relationship, about the age gap in my relationship, about my partner's health and longevity. And that happens with art too. When somebody says, oh, this looks really good, except this looks a little rough. Like, did you notice that? Trust me, they noticed that. Like, nobody's going out here like not observing the flaws in their art. We know that the art is flawed. Art is flawed, though. Nothing's perfect. Nothing is perfect. And no one should be trying to make it perfect. And that is where the shame comes in. It's because for some reason we think we're supposed to be perfect. I realize that I've said that's where the shame comes in about like 7 things. Forgive me, my ADHD med is not doing its best today. But when we believe that we're supposed to be perfect, when the result is inevitably imperfect, shame. I should have done better. I should have known better. I should have gone back in time and started practicing this 20 years ago. I'm bad. I'm bad. I am bad at this. I don't deserve nice things. I will simply go walk into the ocean now. What if we didn't? What if we stopped punishing ourselves for imperfections and mistakes? Like, you're allowed to feel guilt and shame if something that you did hurt someone. Like, if you totally just kind of fucked up, someone's feelings are hurt because of something that you did, that's valid. Their emotional response, valid. In a healthy relationship, ideally, you would be able to talk that out and have a constructive conflict where you both rebuilt that trust. Conflict is an opportunity for trust. However, sometimes you're not going to care that much. Sometimes it's not going to feel safe enough to have a conflict. And so people might ghost you in your life. And I'm not necessarily talking about art anymore. Like, I'm talking about friendships and making human mistakes and losing touch with people throughout your life, especially neurodivergent people. We have a hard time with like the subtext. Sometimes people are saying things that they don't mean, or they think that they are communicating something very clearly to you and you're totally missing it. I have a friendship that just kind of ended. It just sort of slow burn ghosted. And I still don't really understand why. And somebody even like went and talked to the person on my behalf to like figure out why, and then came back to me and told me, and I was like, I don't remember any of that happening. But I also don't think that person's a liar. So what I assume happened is that they were communicating to me via subtext that I was just not picking up. And that's okay. I don't need to punish myself for that for the next 10 years of my life and be like, oh, I was such a bad friend. Life is too short. Life is too short for the constant self-punishment of humanity because you make a mistake. Whether you made a mistake on an art piece, whether you made a mistake at work, whether you made a mistake with your friends, whether you made a mistake with your romantic partner, any mistake can create guilt and shame, but it does not have to hurt you forever. And this is really hard for neurodivergent people because society expects us to behave in certain ways, to follow certain rules that feel arbitrary to us, like applying to a job with a cover letter. I don't care about them as much anymore because I used to believe, oh, your cover letter is how you make a first impression, yada, yada. And now I know that a cover letter is largely used to like prejudge you. And people who aren't as good at verbal communication in a cover letter are going to get denied jobs, even though they are just as capable, if not more, than the people who can write a really nice letter. Okay, so lesson number 1 for this episode is to use your nice art supplies, and don't be afraid, and don't be ashamed or guilty when you use them. You can get more. And if you truly can't, like if you need to ration them, that's okay. Or put them on your wish list and ask somebody to get you some more or something. There is some way that you can get some more paint or some more pencils. Thing number 2 is I want to talk about like needs versus wants and the way that we think about creativity, because we look at it like it's a dessert. Like being creative is something that comes after productivity, that comes after the to-do list, that comes after we are done doing all of our diligent tasks throughout the day. I believe that creativity is an inherent need of a person. The way that we need spirituality, the way that we need community, the way that we need privacy, we need creativity. So no, it is not like a survival need. You will be physically fine if you don't do art. But are you going to be emotionally and spiritually fine if you don't do art for long periods of time? Eventually, you're going to start feeling crappy. You're going to feel bad if you're not creative because we are inherently creative creatures. So when you can start to see creativity as a need instead of just a want, instead of just an indulgent desire that you have, that helps to remove the shame as well. Because we feel shame when we think that we're taking time for creativity that should be going other places. Should is your clue that that task has likely been assigned by someone else's expectation. You should clean the kitchen before you do art. According to whom? I don't know. On my deathbed, I want more art and less clean kitchens. That's just me. I do care that the kitchen is clean, but not if I am feeling so inspired that I need to work on something creatively. Because that moment's going to pass and that kitchen will still be there. When you decide that you do not have to prove yourself with your art, that is where shame disappears. Because there is no shame when everything is fine, when everything is neutral, when everything is beautiful. Simply because it is, shame can't touch that. Because shame wants to come in and judge it for being imperfect or for taking up time that was better spent elsewhere. That's all fake. That's all capitalism. That's all hustle culture. You can disrupt that status quo by taking time for art. And it's going to feel really uncomfortable at first. But the guilt and the shame, those don't mean that you are making any kind of mistake. Those are societal programming. So take a peek at your guilt and shame triggers. Really let yourself be honest and notice the patterns within. Are these things that you are judging about yourself, or are these outside judgments that you are carrying even though you don't have to? And that's where we start to unpack the shame of being creative on your own terms. Okay, I'm going to leave us there so that I stop rambling. And our next episode will be about worthiness and self-love. So a little more of the same. As we start to unpack that shame, what comes next is that we get to cultivate real self-love around our creative pursuits. So I'm very excited about that. And I will see you guys later. If you are ready to take that "it is not your fault" release of shame and reclaiming of your creative passions in our capitalist hellscape, you will want to mark your calendars for April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for my upcoming training, Art is Revolution. This is going to be dope. Our society values productivity, perfection, and profit over passion. Not on my watch. This training is your invitation to come soak up the creative energy and reclaim your passion in this hustle-obsessed culture on your terms. You are creative. I help you believe that. So if you are ready to believe it, head on over to askfishfisher.com and sign up for Art is Revolution 2024. And again, that is happening April 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I cannot wait to see you there. And as always, I would love to give a shout out to the Pancake Copycats, my podcast producers who specialize in marketing support for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, as well as Ashton Powers, singer-songwriter who wrote and performed my opening jingle. Okay, friends, I will see you next time.